I'm broadly speaking an ethical emotivist. When we make ethical statements or pronouncements, we're essentially just expressing emotions at each other. And so when I say that murder is wrong, I'm sort of expressing some kind of distaste, or I'm expressing something akin to saying, don't do that.
Is morality just a feeling, like saying, boo, murder? That's what Alex O'Connor seems to suggest. I'm not so sure. Now, I'm not saying Alex is entirely wrong. We are both atheists, and we agree on a lot. But on this point, his ethical emotivism, I think his view is incomplete. That's why I want to join the conversation. Normally, I focus on critiquing religious claims, but in this video, I want to do something a bit different. Offer a respectful challenge to a fellow atheist. I've seen plenty of pushback on Alex from moral objectivists, but not much critique from others who, like me, don't believe in objective morality. So this is my contribution to that conversation. Let's start with some quick definitions. I'm a moral subjectivist. Alex is an emotivist. Both of us fall under moral anti-realism. We don't think there are objective moral facts out there in the universe. But there is a key difference. As a subjectivist, I see moral claims as reflections of a person's subjective values, principles that are meaningful and reason-responsive within their own moral framework. Alex, on the other hand, sees moral claims as expressions of emotion. To him, saying murder is wrong is like saying, boo, murder, not true or false, just a reaction. You can think of it this way. Emotivism is like clapping or booing at a performance. Subjectivism is more like writing a personal review. It's still based on your perspective, but with reasons behind it. So why do I think subjectivism works better? Let's find out. Hello, my friends. This is Shen from Mindful Living. If you are new here, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. On this channel, we explore how to think more clearly and mindfully, especially when it comes to what we believe. I usually critique religious arguments, but today I'm turning the lens inward. This isn't about being right for the sake of it. If you spot flaws in my reasoning, I genuinely want to hear from you. I'm open to changing my mind if you give me a good enough reason. Let's take a look at how Alex explains his views on metaethics.
I'm broadly speaking an ethical emotivist. When we make ethical statements or pronouncements, we're essentially just expressing emotions at each other. And so when I say that murder is wrong, I'm sort of expressing some kind of distaste, or I'm expressing something akin to saying, don't do that, which is just like a command. It doesn't have any truth value. It's not even subjectively true or false. It's just like a command or an expression.
Now, here's my main issue with that view. Expressing emotion is part of what we do when making moral claims, but it's not all we do. To be fair, emotivism does offer a useful insight. It reminds us that moral statements often carry emotional weight. The stronger we feel about an issue, the more absolute our claims tend to sound, like when someone says, murder can never be justified. But moral claims aren't just emotional outbursts. There's usually some kind of reasoning behind them, something deeper than just, I don't like it. Having a strong aversion or disgust isn't enough to make something morally wrong. Sure, some people who don't think critically might treat their feelings as moral judgments. Whatever they find gross, they call wrong. And when you press them on why, they just say, I don't know, it just feels wrong. But those cases don't represent how moral reasoning works at its best. Every field has shallow thinkers. In politics, someone might say democracy is the best system simply because they like it. But that doesn't mean political theory is just about feelings. There are serious arguments, data, and frameworks to back up that preference. The same is true for ethics. When I say murder is wrong, I'm not just saying boo murder. I'm saying murder goes against my moral framework, which values well-being. And since murder destroys well-being, I'm against it. That's what I mean by murder is wrong. Alex might ask, but why do you value well-being in the first place? And I answer, because I'm built with empathy. Like most people, my first instinct is self-preservation. But thanks to mirror neurons, I feel distress when others suffer. And that makes me want to reduce their suffering too. Now, Alex would push further. But why keep that instinct of empathy running instead of ignoring it? But at that point, we are no longer talking about murder. We are talking about the moral foundations that precede any specific judgment. My empathy, my aversion to suffering, my childhood experiences, my education, they all interact to form the base layer of how I think about right and wrong. I didn't choose to have those raw instincts, but I do choose to recognize and prioritize some over others, shaped by the interplay of my experiences, upbringing, and reflection. I've built my moral outlook around empathy and well-being, not because they're objectively correct, but because they resonate with me and reflect the kind of person I want to be. That's why I'm a moral subjectivist. I don't believe in objective moral facts floating out there in the universe, but I do believe in the meaningfulness of building a coherent moral framework grounded in my human nature, experiences, and values. From that foundation, I can give reasons why I think certain actions, like murder, are morally wrong. To be clear, I don't assume others must agree with me. People have different instincts, upbringings, and life experiences, which shape different moral frameworks. That's perfectly understandable. Still, I can try to build a bridge from my values to theirs. A bridge only works if there's something to connect to on the other side. Some shared concern, some common impulse toward empathy or fairness. If none of that exists, I can't force agreement. But if there's even a sliver of common ground, reason can help us build something meaningful together. Once again, when I say murder is wrong, I'm not just expressing a feeling. It's a conclusion I reach by reasoning from my natural and learned moral instincts. In fact, I could hold that belief even in the absence of any strong emotion in the moment. There are plenty of moral issues we don't have strong emotions about. We still judge them using logic, evidence, and our broader values, not based on whether they give us anxiety or outrage. Take cruise ships, for example. I used to feel positive about them visiting my city's harbor. I thought they brought economic activity. But then I read studies showing that cruise ships often bring more harm than benefit. They pollute the water, overwhelm city services, and most of the money they generate flows back to the corporations that own them, not to local businesses. That information changed my mind. I now think it's wrong for my city council to welcome so many cruise ships. But did that change my feelings when I see one? Not really. They still look magnificent to me, and I'd still love to go on one someday. But now I also want their visits reduced. That shift in judgment wasn't emotional, it was rational. I updated my moral stance not because my feelings changed, but because the facts changed. Even if over time I start to feel disgust when I see a cruise ship, that emotion would still be rooted in the facts I've learned. So even if I say boo cruise ships now, it's not a raw emotional outburst. It's an expression shaped by reason. Now I think Alex would actually agree with me on one important point. Facts still matter in our ethical assessments. In another video, he says,
And you might sort of think that something's right or wrong, and then you look on the TV and you see something and it changes your mind. But as Aya also pointed out, so much of what we call moral disagreement is actually just factual disagreement. It exists on that descriptive plane. Because if the thing that changed your mind was a factual statement that you saw on the news, a number of people who'd been stopped at a border, or an amount of suffering that had been caused, you haven't changed your mind on anything ethical. You've just changed your mind about a descriptive fact. And that descriptive fact has informed your ethical judgment on that particular instance.
To a large extent, I agree. Many moral disagreements are really just disagreements about the facts. Once we understand the situation the same way, we often discover more ethical common ground than we expected. But here's where I find Alex's view puzzling. If I change my moral position because new facts come to light, how is that not also a change in my ethical judgment? That's exactly what's happening. Let me give an example. Suppose I used to oppose gay marriage. I believed it wouldn't make gay people any happier, or that it might even harm society. But then I saw the data. real compelling statistics showing that legalizing same-sex marriage improves well-being in the gay community without harming anyone else. So I changed my mind. I now support gay marriage. That wasn't just a change in my view of the facts, that was also a change in my ethical stance on this issue. Now, Alex might respond, but you didn't change your core value. You still believe people should have the right to live happy lives. And I'd agree. My fundamental value didn't change, but my stance on gay marriage did. Just because a belief is built on deeper values doesn't mean it's not an ethical belief in its own right. Ethical judgments often come in layers. A change in facts can shift how we apply our deeper values. Even if those core values stay the same, our moral conclusions might change. So to say nothing ethical has changed misses something important. Real moral growth often happens in that middle space, where new information reshapes how our values play out in practice. This leads to a deeper concern I have with emotivism. It doesn't explain why we try to persuade others by giving reasons, such as appealing to consistency, fairness, or consequences, not just by saying how we feel. I can't speak for Alex, but I'd guess that when he says murder is wrong, he's not just expressing frustration. He's hoping you agree with him based on shared reasoning. His conviction doesn't come from emotion alone. It comes from the reasons he believes support that judgment. And I think that mindset is present even in emotivists, whether they acknowledge it or not. After all, if moral language were just emotional expression, just boo or yay, then trying to persuade someone to agree with us wouldn't make much sense. It would be more like emotional manipulation. Don't do this because it upsets me. That's not rational dialogue, and I'm sure Alex doesn't mean to reduce it to that. But rational persuasion is exactly what we try to do, and it's what we expect from others in return. That's why I think emotivism doesn't fully capture the complexity of moral life, especially in cases where our feelings and judgments diverge. I might be tempted by a behavior, I might even enjoy it, but I can still believe it's wrong and choose not to act on it. That's not just about emotion, that's about a moral framework I've thought through and committed to, even when it conflicts with my other desires. And the reverse is also true. I might feel disgusted by a certain behavior, but still believe there's nothing morally wrong with it. I may personally avoid it, but I wouldn't condemn others who choose it. In both cases, moral judgment goes beyond mere feeling. That's something emotivism, at least in the form Alex presented, doesn't explain very well. Take heterosexual unions, for example, viewed from the perspective of some homosexual individuals. They might find the image personally distasteful, but most don't conclude that heterosexuality is immoral. Their discomfort isn't a moral condemnation, it's simply a private, emotional reaction they choose not to moralize. Or consider a gay Christian who believes that homosexual acts are sinful even though he desires them. He craves intimacy so much that during moments of moral lapse, he gives in, only to feel guilt and regret afterward. In this scenario, we see a clear separation between desire, emotion, and moral judgment. His feelings pull one way, but his moral stance remains fixed in another. That tension reveals that his judgment is not reducible to how he feels. Scenarios like this show why I think moral subjectivism works better than emotivism. As a subjectivist, I do believe there is such a thing as right and wrong, but those judgments are grounded in my personal standards and values. They are not objective facts, but they are also not just emotional reactions. While my emotions often align with my moral beliefs, they don't always. And when they don't, I'm not confused about where I stand. My rational assessment, not my feelings or desires, determines what I consider moral or immoral. Because of that, I can meaningfully interact with people who hold different views. We can use arguments, not just emotions, to try to persuade each other. It's not about who feels the strongest. It's about whose reasons make more sense within a shared context. Here's another example. I've met Christians who oppose homosexuality not because they are disgusted by it, but because they believe it's against God's will. In fact, they often feel genuine sympathy for the LGBTQ community, but also feel bound by religious doctrine. Their moral stance isn't emotional, it's doctrinal. So when I engage with people like that, I don't try to change their feelings about gay people. They are already sympathetic. Instead, I focus on questioning their religious beliefs that shape their conclusions. I challenge the coherence and credibility of the system they are appealing to. That's a rational critique, not an emotional one, because I believe moral judgment should be grounded in reasoning, not just reaction. And this gets to the heart of my objection to emotivism. If moral discourse is about reason-giving, coherence, and critical reflection, then ethical emotivism just doesn't give us the full picture. It reduces moral language to expressive outbursts, yay or boo. But moral life is more than that. It's a space where we expect people to give reasons, defend their views, and revise their judgments when confronted with better arguments or more consistent value systems. Even without objective moral facts, we still engage in moral reasoning because we believe in the value of thoughtful dialogue. We hope that people on both sides can be persuaded not just to feel differently, but to think differently and to reconsider their values in light of empathy, coherence, and evidence. That's why I believe moral subjectivism is a better framework. It allows for real disagreements, genuine moral growth, and reason-based persuasion, while still acknowledging that morality is rooted in human values, not in external moral facts floating out there in the universe. It helps explain why we can hold moral positions we don't feel strongly about, resist actions we secretly enjoy, and struggle deeply over living out what's right, because we care about living up to our own values, even when it hurts. Emotivism, by contrast, leaves us with a thinner moral vocabulary. It doesn't explain conflicts, regret, or personal growth very well. If moral claims are just emotional reactions, just boo or yay, then moral change becomes mood change. But we know from real life that's not how it works. People change their minds on moral issues because their thinking deepens, not because their feelings happen to shift. So, while I respect Alex's consistency in rejecting moral realism, I believe there's a better path than emotivism. To be clear, I'm not claiming to refute emotivism in all its forms. There are more sophisticated versions I haven't touched on in this video. My critique is aimed specifically at the version Alex has shared publicly. Maybe there are better ways to defend emotivism, and if you know them, I'm open to hearing more. This video isn't meant to disparage Alex. I respect his work and think he's contributing something valuable. And who knows, maybe I'm missing something. If you think so, drop a comment and let me know. I also have another video where Alex says he doesn't understand how a Christian apologist like Westhoff could make certain mistakes, but I think I can help explain it. Tap on the screen if you are curious about what you might see that Alex missed. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.